I think personally, there's an untapped opportunity to get into leasing in the general aviation space. And my company, the company that I work for, has had or has some business aircraft, general aviation aircraft in our portfolio, right? And all of those aircraft are leased out right now. They're leased out with charter operators. And honestly, I spent, better part of 12 years in business aircraft, and I think that that's a completely untapped market, right? A lot of owner operators get into, purchasing an aircraft for the first time. Maybe they've had a jet card or something before where they've had access to business aviation. But then when they step into full ownership, right, then they understand the brunt of how much, capital is required to run, an aircraft, So I think they can probably benefit the same way as airlines would from, a leasing structure, which would cost them a lot less. And at the end of 3 or 5 years, if they're not enjoying the general aviation experience, they could just basically return the asset back and wash their hands clean of it, right? Um, I know of a couple of companies that started off sort of with a leasing model, and then they sort of transitioned back into the traditional like brokerage type sales, and they've got some airplanes on charter that they sort of manage on behalf of a customer and come up with charter hours for them and stuff and generate a little bit of revenue. But I have not seen a lot of leasing activity on the business jet side.
Okay. Then the other piece here is that you really need access to capital, and the cost of capital is extremely important, right? So how how does a lessor like Avmax, how do you go about all of that? Do you have existing relationships with banks and other capital lenders, or are you always sort of shopping around for the best rate per transaction?
Well, Avmax historically has had a relationship with Export Development Canada, so we get most of our financing through EDC. Um, we did tap into some other markets prior to COVID, right? When access to capital was very, very inexpensive, right? But after COVID and everything that's going on right now with inflation around us, right? The cost of capital has become so high right now that anytime we're looking at any type of transaction that we're doing right now, cost of capital is probably the most important, criteria, because we'd be able to borrow money at rock bottom rates before. But now we've seen, some private investment firms, at least, during the height of COVID and stuff, trying to get us to pay, upwards of 12, 13, 14%, and that's huge. That's really, really big.
So to that point, do you think that, some of the lessors in some of the other parts of the world have slightly more favorable terms?
The larger lessors, right, finance their aircraft in many, many, many different ways. They'll go to the capital markets. They'll put together, special SPV, special purpose vehicles, and they'll pool a bunch of aircraft in there and basically offer it up as an investment opportunity, almost like if you're buying a mutual fund of some sort. So they've got a lot of different avenues, right, to be able to source capital from the market. Okay. Whereas a smaller leasing company like us don't have those facilities. We basically have to go, to banks, credit agencies. In some cases, we might go looking for equity capital from private lenders and such. That doesn't happen very often. So we're kind of limited in terms of how much we can do, just because of the fact we don't have that scale, that size.